It's draft day, ladies and gentlemen. Arguably, Dave, the most pivotal day on the NHL calendar. Lots of terrific picks could be made in the next 24 to 48 hours, and there could be some not so great picks like we've seen over the course of many Maple Leafs drafts in the last 2 decades or so. And well, I guess probably throughout the entire Maple Leafs organization, the entire 100 plus years, there's been more than a couple bad draft picks. But nonetheless, it's draft day today, and which means there's GMs, scouts, everybody's out there, out and about, talking in Montreal, the first draft that's in person since the pandemic. And it's good to see, first and foremost. Really nice to see everybody under one roof. It's going to be really cool to see it today. And on today's show, we'll hear from Kyle Dubas as he did his media availability yesterday. He touches on the plans with some of the UFAs, some of the RFAs. And is he potentially hinting, Dave, at bringing back Petr Mrazek? I'll let you guys be the judge of that one. All this and more coming up on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also now catch us on video format on YouTube. Just hit us up, Locked On Leafs on YouTube, and hit subscribe. Draft day today, David. You excited, pal?
Oh, 100%. As you mentioned, the first one in person. I think I can't go with another virtual draft. I can't do it. I don't know what it is. In person, it just feels like things really, you see guys moving around, GMs taking phone calls.
Get the double Dubas gift going at some point. What do you think? You think we'll get that at some point this weekend?
I just wanted him to do it just for as a joke. I don't even care if he's even on the phone.
Well, you saw he put as his Twitter avatar, his Twitter profile pic is him with the phone gif. It's quite funny. A nice little social media or popular culture reference from Kyle Dubas himself.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. But look, I think that. Sorry there. I love draft day, like draft day, free agency, trade deadline day. Like these are for fans who just love the politics of sports and trades and movement and all that. Like this is one of the big dates of the year that you look forward to. So I'm excited. There's so much content flying around. You don't know what's true. You don't know what's false. There's just so much of it that's going around. There are lots of buzz that we could see a lot of movement today, not only with draft picks, but with some big time players. How much of that the Maple Leafs are going to be in on, I'm not entirely sure. We do know that they're potentially looking to move out Ilya Mikheyev's UFA rights. So perhaps that could bring back a draft pick. I wouldn't expect an overly high pick by any means, but a draft pick of some kind. Sandin, is there a situation brewing there? Could they trade their first round pick to go out and get a solid piece of the puzzle for the future? There's a lot of options that I guess they could have that could happen today. But Kyle Dubas was speaking with the media. So I think what we're going to do here, Dave, is let's just play his whole press conference. It's about 15 minutes, but instead of just playing it from start to finish, we'll play it, and then when we want to pick up on something and we want to comment on one of the things that he said, we'll pause it and we'll kind of get into what he said and build off of it. So why don't we just kind of start it off and see where it goes, and I'll let you know if I want to pause and talk about something, and then you go ahead, pause it as well if there's something a point that you want to jump off on. So let's play it. This is Kyle Dubas, pre-draft media availability on the eve of draft day. Let's hear what he had to say.
Kyle, with so many teams near at the cap, do you expect it to be, and not just for you guys, but league-wide, a lot of activity going in the next 24 hours before the draft? And does it help is it any different when you guys can see each other live as opposed to the last 2 years?
I think like it's. I mean, I think that's how in your mind you want to imagine that it is, that everyone's going to get together in there and you're going to sit until you strike deals and such. But I think there's a lot of communication that goes on well before his eyes, and you have your plan. Everyone by this time knows what all the other teams are trying to achieve, and this now is more about executing it and the plans being put into place and there being some activity. I think with the large majority of teams very close to the cap, there's always jockeying and different things that are happening, and cap space is very scarce throughout the league. So that has its impacts on teams, and especially in our case, in moving to continue to contend and push our group forward. It's always a major consideration in all that we do.
How would you describe the state of talks with Jack Campbell and your plan going forward for goaltending right now?
We continue to speak to Jack. Obviously, it's no secret that goaltending is a priority for us, and we'll continue to speak with he and his people as we go through the coming week here. Obviously, it's getting close to decision time for everybody, and especially for Jack, because it's a life-altering event. And so we'll continue to speak with them here this week and through the weekend, and be well prepared going into next week for where we want to go with it.
Same question.
Let's pause it there. Jack Campbell. So still talking with Jack Campbell. We've heard so much over the last couple of weeks that it's not particularly close. There haven't been strong figures that have been reported that they've talked about. His agent came out and said that Kurt Overhart, they're still in conversation, but no figures have been discussed. You got to think at this point, figures have been discussed. And like you said, they're getting close to decision time here. If there's a potential on the draft floor that there's a team out there, whether it's Edmonton, who reportedly is interested in Jack Campbell, or it's New Jersey, who has some interest in Jack Campbell, or, maybe it's another team like Detroit or something. I think they got to figure this out by draft day. And if they realize, okay, we're not going to be able to pay you what you want, what you can get on the open market from one of these teams, give him permission, or his agent permission, over the next 24 hours while everybody's there at the draft. Talk to some of the agents, free agents that are interested in him, give him that permission, and see if he can find some way to do some sort of trade where he can trade his rights away to a team that already has like an extension basically planned for it, and get something in return for this guy, whether if it's a draft pick or a prospect, something. But I don't, like they say it's close to decision time. I think decision time is now, Dave. And why not take advantage of the situation with so many goalie needy teams that will probably give up something to get that, extra negotiation time with a Jack Campbell?
Yeah, I don't know if this is just because Kyle Dubas is trying to keep that door open for Jack Campbell, or
I don't think it's going to be like, I think it's closed, man. Like, if
how-
he's looking to get $5 to $6 million, which is what's being reported, there's no way Toronto can compete with that. And if there's other teams that are willing to give him that type of money, because A, they can afford it, it's part of their cap structure and they can afford it, and B, they also want to go a 5-year term. I don't think Toronto's looking to do that either. So they can't do full dollar amounts, and they can't do full term. I don't see how Jack could possibly come back to Toronto knowing full well that there are way better offers out there financially for him and his family if he walks a free agency.
Yeah, and I think Kyle Dubas realizes that too. He kind of says it's a life-altering decision for Jack Campbell. He's kind of saying that it's like, we can only offer him so much. Jack's got to do what's best for himself as well. You don't fault him for that. So yeah, I just don't know if a team that wants to sign him, unless you're like desperate to try to get him, I just don't know if we thought the Edmonton Oilers would have done that with Zach Hyman last year.
Yeah, there was reports out there that they were willing to give a draft pick to get him, and essentially they said the Leafs were like, no, we want a better draft pick. So they said, all right, we'll take our chances and sign him in free agency since we know he wants to come here anyway. I don't know if Jack Campbell has a preferred destination, which is why if you can kind of trade for his rights and give you that opportunity to kind of be the first crack at it and negotiating with him, maybe that's worth it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a slightly different situation, but I completely get the point. If you're a team, why would you give up an asset if you can sign him a week from now? It's a very valid point, but I find it to be somewhat different circumstances. Why don't we keep going and seeing what else Kyle Dubas has to say?
Well, he had lots to say, that's for sure.
About Ilya Mikheyev.
I mean, frankly speaking, I think unfortunately, it's very public, the state of talks there. So, we'll see. Anything can change. You never want to totally close it off, but we'll see what happens. And if not, it's been a great 3 years for him in Toronto, and it's a great story for us of a player that came as a free agent, and we'll look to cash in and using the resources that we had, and he put in great effort returning from injury, and obviously had a great season here with us. So it's great for him, and we'll continue to stay in touch with them in case the market changes.
Speaking of Russians, was there any update on the state of Russian players, either the draft or the problems that some Russians are facing even getting out of the country now?
Not really on that front. Heading into the draft, I mean, obviously the Russian players are all eligible for the draft, and it's been a little bit more difficult to gather the same information on them as others because of the restrictions in place as the situation unfolds there in Ukraine. So that's they're eligible, and we'll evaluate them as they come forward on our list, and we get set for our selections.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like Russian players are not going to be high up on the Leafs list this year.
Maybe not, but are you following this Kaprizov story at all, by the way? I know it's not really Leafs related, but
I wonder
if
report. Yeah, like I've heard like he's in the US.
Explain it for those who are unaware.
So in Russia, you have to complete a mandatory military training or service in order, otherwise if you don't, you're like criminal, like you can get like arrested and like detained, and then they put you in a post. So that's what happened with the Flyers goalie prospect. The name escapes me right now, but he got detained, and then he got sent to a Russian military post where he has to go and serve his duty, and he can't. And some are saying this might have been a ploy by the KHL to keep him in Russia because he was trying to come to North America. So what's happened with Kaprizov here is apparently there's some NHL players who bought fake IDs to say that they have completed their mandatory service in Russia. And so there was a report saying he was in the US and he's trying to maintain status here in the US so he won't get brought back to Russia. But then Michael Russo of the Athletics said, no, he's still in Russia. But this is a situation kind of you have to keep monitoring because, obviously Kaprizov is a star player for the Minnesota Wild. And if he gets stuck in Russia, I don't know what the Minnesota Wild can really do about it.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's going to be a sticky situation. And I'm curious, Dave, if perhaps we could see some of the Russian prospects, not just on the Maple Leafs draft board, but on a lot of these draft boards, kind of get slid down a couple of pegs just based on this threat and the state of what's going on in Russia right now. I'm curious if we see any ramifications from all this in the draft tonight. All right, let's continue. Actually, you know what? Before we continue, why don't we go ahead and tell the good folks listening to the pod, watching on YouTube, let's tell them about one of today's show sponsors, and that's your friends, Dave, over at Built Bar.
Of course, for the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar. Guess what? Your good friends over there have now given it the Puffs treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love, and all in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling, listen for a second, because guess what? Not only do they taste good, they still remain good for you. They're low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. Coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time, so make sure you go to built.com to make sure you don't miss out. They are going fast because they taste amazing. The best part about Built Puffs is, of course, not only do they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because they're actually good for you. They have collagen protein, which your body absorbs way better and more efficiently. And let's not forget that they're really the perfect treat. If you have a craving and you just like, you know what, I'm craving something sweet. Don't want to go too far. So you need a quick, healthy snack. Why not just grab a Built Bar? They have many delicious flavor. Of course, today we're talking about the coconut brownie chunk puff, but there are so many great flavors out there. So make sure you go to built.com right now and make sure you use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. So that's promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs, and we're taking a listen to Kyle Dubas' media availability on the eve of draft day. So this was Kyle Dubas talking yesterday about the draft process, about what the Leafs are doing, some of the UFAs, RFAs, really hit on a whole slew of topics. So let's continue here and listen to what Kyle Dubas has to say.
You guys had, Tampa on the ropes, obviously, and you see them go on their run. What are you thinking as that run's going on? Does it reinforce your belief? Does it sort of be, we were so close?
I never think of things that way. In the end, we didn't get it done. So I think to pause the time and space continuum and say, well, we would have done the same thing they did in their series, is that we just have to focus on ourselves, and we know we have to continue to get better. Again, we didn't get it done against them, so the what ifs don't really help. It doesn't help cure the sleepless nights or make you feel any better. If anything, probably a little bit the other way. But we just have to focus on ourselves and avoiding that same feeling and avoiding these same questions of what if, and does it make you feel better that this team you played well against was 2 wins away again. We need to be the team that's in that position moving ahead, and we feel we're poised and ready to do it, and most importantly, our players feel they are. So that's our focus.
Would be nice. Would be nice.
Rasmus Sandin, and what kind of role do you envision for next year?
I mean, with Rasmus Sandin, and I'd put he and Timothy Liljegren both in the same spot. They're massive parts of our future. I mean, they're significantly younger than the other full-time members of our defense corps, and we need them to continue to take steps. With in Rasmus's case, one of the major focuses on trying to set him up to continue to be healthy all the way through the year, and putting the proper resources into him to arm him to do that. And that's really our focus with him. Obviously, supremely talented player, very competitive. We need him to continue to take the steps that we need for him to assert himself, not only to an every night player, which he largely had become before he was injured in Nashville, but to become a top player in our group, especially as our players age ahead of him. So that's our major focus with him, and our only focus with him is we see he and Timothy as both massive parts of it moving ahead.
You have a couple about an offer sheet and all for him if you don't get it done sooner than later?
If there's going to be an offer sheet, the sooner the better, so we can make our decision to move on.
You have a couple of unrestricted.
Okay, we've talked about this a little bit, Dave. A little bit of a sassy comment from Kyle Dubas there. There's going to be an offer sheet. Let's get it over with so we can all move on, he says. What do you think about that comment?
Oh, so part of me was wondering, was this twofold? Was this sort of him telling Rasmus Sandin, look, if you want to take an offer sheet, man, just do it so we can just get it over with? Like, that's how I envisioned that comment. And then part of me is also just wondering, is there a number he has in his head, as we kind of mentioned on the last podcast, where he says, okay, we're willing to go to this number, and then we'll match to that number.
Mm-hmm.
So if, like, let's say we brought up the idea of, let's say, 2 point, I think it was like what, 2.4,
2.4 and a half, let's say
2.4 and a half, or something along those lines.
Even to me is still a bit steep, but
it's steep. But you hear how Kyle Dubas is talking about Rasmus Sandin.
mm-hmm.
He's talking about the age factor and how they're kind of looking at these guys as the transition to the future. But at the same time, like that tone where he's just like, all right, he's probably heard the same thing, and he's probably thinking, all right, if a team's just gonna do it, let's just get it over with, so that we either make our decision one way or the other. Just kind of seems like they're ready to do whatever is necessary in this situation.
Yeah, I almost feel like we're not going to see anything out of Sandin for a while. They probably just want to see how much money they have left over once they sort out goaltending. So they don't want to take any extra money away from whatever potential player they could add in the goaltending route. And essentially they're like, hey, we need to get a goalie, and then we could focus on Sandin and see what we can actually afford for Rasmus at that point. But if an offer sheet comes a call, and before that point, before the Leafs are ready to make that, they're going to have to make a decision a lot quicker. And I'll be curious to see what that internal number is. 2.5 seems a little bit high now that I think about it. Like, it may only be up like 2.1, like whatever the pick threshold is. Maybe if they can get a pick compensation from it, that's probably what they would consider their threshold, perhaps. I don't know, but we'll see. But that's an interesting comment there from Kyle Dubas, basically kind of calling the bluff of Rasmus Sandin and whoever wants to potentially make an offer sheet, saying, "Go ahead, get it done, so we can move on with this." If that's going to be the case,
Yeah, it actually will make the Leafs' decision a lot easier.
it really would, because it's at that point, it's like we don't have to do any more negotiating. It's either we can afford to pay you this number or we can't. If we can, we'll match it. If we can't, all right, we're taking the compensation and good luck on your new team. So maybe deep down, he kind of wants that to happen and just kind of see what type of number Sandin ends up accepting elsewhere, and hopefully it's within the parameters of what the Leafs are able to match themselves. All right, let's continue.
Free agents after next season, and Kerfoot and Bunting, any chance of maybe being proactive and trying to extend them a bit at some point this summer?
I mean, both are hugely important players for us. Kerfoot, Bunting, and David Kampf, I'd put in that same vein, and Justin Hall's in that boat, and Pierre Engvall's in that boat as well. So all are a year away from being UFAs, and with varying different statuses this year. And, we have to evaluate where our cap space is at. I think it would be premature before we go into free agency and finish this week to go down that path.
Is the plan more for free agents, or the plan more for Marlies to make an impact next year, maybe in your bottom six?
We would like it to be a really healthy competition between both, Kevin. We feel that there are some Marlies that can really push for those roles and that have come along. And it's one thing that we've lacked in the past, is having guys in those spots be able to really push and play the way we want them to down there. And now we feel like we have guys in that group, and it was laid out very clearly to them in their exit meetings. This is what we expect from you. This is what the opportunity is going to be. Now go and put the summer in that you need and come and take it. And I also think that we can't just count on all of them being at their best, and we need to supplement that with some players in free agency. They're obviously not going to be the most enticing signings we make, but they're hugely important for our team. I think in the end, we need to look back, Josh, 5 years from now and think that we picked the best player. So to have a guy just jump in to say we've got him for $9.25 or lower, I don't think that's the smartest thing for us. We want to make sure that we're picking the player that when we look back on the draft 5-10 years from now, we unequivocally say with our pick, we took the best player available, regardless of whether they made the NHL in 23, 24, or 27.
I feel like that's an important kind of distinction he's making there, right? Where he's kind of saying, all right, we want to look back on this 5-10 years from now, and did we take the best player that we could? Because we have seen over the years, they necessarily haven't really done that. Like, I think back to the Frederick Gauthier, like that draft.
Yeah, sure. Where you're thinking they need to think about projection as opposed to, what we need right now. What's the need right now? That may not necessarily be the case, because whatever they may need right now may not be the best player in 3 years. It could be someone else who they left on the board. Like, I totally understand what you're saying there. Yeah, of course.
All right, just wanted to make that
like take an Igor. Who they take? Igor Korshkov in the second round back in 2016, and they needed a little bit more meat and potatoes, and they left behind somebody by the name of Alex DeBrincat on the draft table. So yeah, I think that he's certainly it's a good observation. I think he realizes we can't go after what we need right now. We just got to take the best player available, and I think that's the correct way of drafting, in my opinion.
It's just like, even when like Rodion Amirov was selected, they're like, a lot of people are just like, oh, they should have taken this defenseman.
And they still should have taken Braden Schneider. They should have taken Braden Schneider or Caden Gooley. One of those two would have been nice, to be honest.
But you think about it, like, maybe you don't think that Brain Schneider and Caden Gooley are going to be closer to the league when you need them versus Rodon Amirov could be the one kind of replacing, let's say, William Nylander down the road.
Yeah, he could, but I remember a big reason why Schneider at the time was like the pick was because he was very close to being in the NHL. He had an NHL ready body. He was a right shot defenseman, played a rugged game, and they thought like potentially within the next 2 years of being drafted, he could be in the NHL. And look at that, he was for the New York Rangers this year, playing in the playoffs. So I still think to this point, but hey. That's only a couple years out from the draft. He's talking 5 years. Maybe at 3 years from now, Rodion Amirov surpasses him, I suppose. That's still possible. It's still possible. Let's continue.
Taking the best player available, does the climate in Russia at all, does it impact how you recruit Russian prospects?
It's hard not to. There's so much uncertainty, and it's a situation I've not encountered in my time here, so it is something that you consider. I think we have people on our staff that were involved when it was very difficult to get players out of Russia for different reasons than it is today, and it was at that time a lot of very good players came to the league a little bit later, so it is certainly foreign territory for me, only in the context of hockey. I don't want to make it seem any different than anything than what I'm speaking of, which is just a hockey decision. There's obviously a much greater human situation happening there. So with regards to the hockey, we will go through the players as they come and evaluate each of their process or their statuses relative to their contract and various different things like that, and then make the decision.
Well, obviously, Haley's got a new title.
Sure.
But in the scope of the league, this is a trend that's happening. What can you say? You've been big on inclusion in the game.
Dr. Wickenheiser, whoever asked the question.
I think it's a great trend because it just shows the many different people, genders, races, sexual orientations, whatever it may be, that are capable of doing great things in hockey. And so to see in the last year, and especially the last week or so here, the hiring become more diverse, I think is great for the future of hockey and the state of hockey, and will certainly help the game as it continues to grow and evolve.
Where have you seen Haley? Like, why did you pick her? I mean, obviously you've been she's part of the organization and moving up, but what about her that you like as an AGM?
Just the massive impact that she makes every single day she's in the facility, and especially in dealing with the players one-on-one in the role as the senior director of player development. And the impact when she's around our Leafs during the year, the impact that she's able to make on them with her own experiences and how competitive she is about everything. Like it's really quite remarkable, and it's very rare. You're able to have someone who's one of, if not the best of all time at what they do, lend that guidance to our players and our staff. So that was a slam dunk, Kevin.
You've also changed direction on the goaltending coaches, and where's the organization going in terms of being able to develop goaltending rather than chase free agent goaltending?
Well, I think it starts with drafting, and we've got two Russian goaltenders, Artur Akhtiamov and Vyacheslav Peksa, that are coming along. Both are in Kazan's system, and we were happy with the years that they had last year. And then, we've got Joe Wall, who last year made his NHL debut and played quite well. Unfortunately, got hurt in March. And then Eric Shelgren came in and at the end of the year stabilized things for us quite well when we desperately needed it. So we feel like we're getting there in that regard. It's just not popped at the NHL level yet, and we need to continue to push. The coaching decision, I'll leave that to Sheldon to discuss in his next availability, and he can give probably a much more clear answer because it's his staff than I.
Do you anticipate having to move out roster players to the draft?
It's all going to depend on what the situation is, Jonas. I understand it's a very fair question, but if we need to create cap space to improve our team, I think we know based on the conversations we've had that we would be able to move a lot of our players if needed for good value or move them along. So I think we're in a good spot there that way.
Well.
The conversations he's had, he knows he can move these players. I mean, you got to think that means that he's got a couple of irons in the fire, and if things break properly, that means that he'll be looking to make some moves. So, I mean, I guess those guys Petr Mrazek is clearly one of them.
We'll hear a little more about Petr Mrazek.
We'll hear more about Petr Mrazek, but he is somebody who potentially
Yep.
could be a guy if they need to move somebody and create cap
Kerfoot.
space. He's one. Kerfoot is one who I think Kerfoot probably has plus value. Like, I think you'll get something back for him. Maybe he was talking about a Jake Muzzin perhaps as well, right? We talked about that in the last episode, how if they decide to go and give Sandin opportunity and try and divvy out Muzzin's cap space a little bit more, maybe they've had conversations with him and with other teams, and if something comes to fruition. But outside of those three, do you think there's anybody else who they look at and say, okay, if we need to create cap space, here's another player they could throw into the mix? I'm not sure, unless you move one of the big four, I guess, if that's what you're thinking too, like a William Nylander, or heaven forbid, you've had a conversation with John Tavares, and there's a lot of people who would like to see that trade go down. I'm not sure we'll see it. But outside of that, that's probably the list of names that he's referring to, I would think, right?
Yeah, like I'm just looking here. He did hear him again bring up Justin Hall.
Right, that's another one. Justin Hall, yes, who I think would have plus value at the very least.
Yeah, like you're not moving him as a cap dump. You're moving him because you think you can get assets in return. Yeah, like that was another one I was thinking of. The Nylander one, I'd only see that if a team just gives
so quiet. Like there's, you hear a lot about JT Miller. You're hearing a lot about now. Vladimir Tarasenko apparently is on the block and could potentially get dealt. Like there's a lot of names out there right now that are highlighting the trade block. Blake Wheeler is one of them, the captain out of Winnipeg. But it's been very quiet on the William Nylander front, which was very hot at the end of the season. And it seems like there's nothing going on there. Like that's not even in the wheelhouse of Kyle Dubas and company at this point, because you don't have any reporters or insiders talking about there being conversations or interest, or, they're listening on these guys. Just doesn't sound like it to me.
No, it doesn't.
No. All right, let's continue.
Well, do you want to do a quick break first before we...
That's a good call. We should take a quick break and tell you about our friends at Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? And why wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You got computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket, so save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership that you could get at Rock Auto? It's a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They got everything from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box. Let them know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. It's draft day in the NHL, and Kyle Dubas. It is pre-draft media availability yesterday, so we're just breaking down and reacting to what Kyle Dubas was saying in that availability. So let's continue with Kyle Dubas to hear what he was talking about yesterday with the media.
Picks this weekend or this week, any possibility of trading the negotiating rights or to gain extra picks?
We are open to anything, Mike, for sure. We're in a better position than we were last year. Last year we had a second, a fifth, and a sixth. This year we have 2 picks in the top 80. So last year was a typical one. The staff, John Lilly was the director of amateur at that time. Still, Matt Nyes, we picked him late in the second, and he's had a very good year. And then, both Peksa, the goaltender, and Ty Voigt. Or Ty Voigt's going to go to the U.S. camp, and Peksa was on the Russian under-20 team at the end of the year. So, we don't want to make a habit of picking only 3 times, but it's largely a reflection of where we're at as a team and trying to continue to push forward. If there is a way for us to recoup some of that draft capital without depleting our team, then we will.
Considering the lack of success that you've had in the playoffs in the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel personally like your job is on the line more this year than it has been previous years?
I think it's a fair question, Kevin. I feel it's on the line every year, and I'm judged at the end of every season. I don't necessarily feel there's more of a pressure. I just think it is a very important thing for me personally to help deliver for the organization. So, for me, the pressure doesn't change day to day. Every day I'm getting up, trying to do everything I can to help our organization. And obviously the end goal is that we're having success when it matters in the playoffs. I mean, that starts with, as much as we want to just fast forward all the way there, if we skip all these steps, then we'll fall well short. So, I totally understand the question, and I don't treat it any differently. I put a lot of pressure on myself to deliver for the people who've hired me and the people that I work with, and that'll never change.
You mentioned 10 goalies in the system.
Would like to see some playoff success come with that.
Within contract.
Yeah.
Where do you anticipate he might factor in Columbus into next season?
So I've been very happy, David, with Peter and just how he's been in the offseason so far. It's really our first true offseason going through with him. We signed him last year, late July, when free agency was, because it's a little bit different. And, he's been very responsive, very communicative with our staff throughout. When I look at Peter, obviously I think he would be the first to say, and he did, and many times during the year, he steps out in front of everyone here and accepts when he hasn't played to the level that he feels he's capable of. If I'm forecasting and betting on him, do I bet that he was the goalie he was last year in the 20 games, or do I bet he was the goalie he was for the 270 before, which was a 9-10 save percentage guy that can give his team a chance to win? I'd probably bet on the larger sample, and that's where Peter fits into it at this time.
All righty. So that was the big quote that we heard come out of Kyle Dubas' mouth from his media availability. So, do we buy that? I think is a question that I want to know, Dave. Do you buy what Kyle Dubas is selling here, or does it seem like maybe he's trying to drum up that, hey, they would be happy to bring back Petr Mrazek? We think that he's the goaltender. That's a 9-10 career goalie in the 270 games prior, that he was, the sub 900 goaltender in this injury struggling plagued 20 game season that he just had. Therefore, trying to, make it seem like, we don't need to give up these big assets to move on from this guy. We'd be happy to take him. Or are they actually considering bringing this guy back next season? What do you think, Dave?
Mike, anytime a salesman is trying to make a sale, the last thing he is going to do is say, you see this piece of garbage right here? Right? It isn't very good, but we think you guys would do it would be good for you to have. Kyle Dubas is not going to talk negatively about Petr Mrazek, because really he'd be doing a disservice to himself.
True.
To do it, right? I do think maybe there is some truth to what he's saying in that, no, Petr Mrazek probably isn't the 888 save percentage goaltender he was last year. I think there's some thought there. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, Kyle Dubas is not going to sit there and say everything was all peaches and rainbows. But he's also not going to say, yeah, we need to figure out how to get rid of this boat anchor of a contract, and we're going to make that our priority over the next few weeks. Like, he's just not going to do that.
Yeah, you're right. I'll say this, though. I went from maybe an 8% chance of thinking Mrazek would be back with the Maple Leafs. Now it's creeping up to maybe a 25% chance that he's back as the backup for the Toronto Maple Leafs next season. I think there's a little bit of validity and truth to it, where Kyle Dubas clearly bought into this guy less than a year ago, and they signed him in late July last year, signed him to a 3-year deal, gave him a boatload of money, $3.8 million over the, times 3, it basically. And I can't help but wonder, does he still have the same belief that he had a year ago, where he, took a gamble, and he's kind of thinking to himself, maybe we need to double down and give him one more year, one more go at it. I feel like he's not the goalie he was last year. He probably is closer to, that league average goalie that he was in the 270 games prior in his career. And he might take that gamble, and he might consider bringing him back next year. Like at this point, I think it's a lot closer, and I can see a path where that happens. Where maybe before today, before I heard Kyle speak, I didn't think that was really going to be the case, but he was a little convincing that he may actually believe that this guy might be able to rebound, and it could be here in Toronto.
Yeah, and look, they made changes to the goaltending coaching staff, so maybe they feel like let's let our staff kind of evaluate this a little bit. How receptive is Petr Mrazek to a new approach going into the season? Right, he has these meetings with these coaches, and they could say, "Hey, Curtis, what do you think about this guy? Do you think you can fix him, or is it a lost cause?"
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point too. I'm sure that came up in the meeting, in the audition, the interview process of Curtis Sanford. Said, if we bring this guy back next year, do you see holes in his game that are easily correctable, and can you turn him into an at least, a 1B, like a capable backup who can play us 25 to 30 games and give us some solid starts and allow us to win games? Because what's the statistic? They went like 33-4, something like that, when they got 900 or above goaltending this season.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, so like that's all he really needs to give them to get wins, and he's not going to be the team's number one, but as a number two, if you can give him 900 goaltending, and if you can win, 60% of your games doing that, 70% of your games doing that, I think you're in a pretty good spot. And if Curtis Sanford broke down the tape and said, yeah, this is what's happening, this is what I saw here, if he just cleans this up a little bit, give me a summer, give me a full off season, some summer workouts, I'll work with him. Maybe we can turn him back into the goaltender he was when he was, putting up a 222 goals against and, a 919 save percentage when he was in Carolina. Perhaps that he believes that he can turn him around, and that might be a bit of a change of heart that Kyle Dubas is having now with Petr Mrazek, if he got a little bug in the ear from Curtis Sanford saying, we might be able to fix this guy. Might not be a lost cause after all. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Steve Brier's trash maybe is Curtis Sanford's treasure. Maybe.
I'll say, yeah, like if the Leafs feel like trading Mrazek just doesn't make sense, if they have to give up too many assets or anything, we already know the buyout is a tough one to swallow. It'd be easier to buy him out next season if you were going to do that, because then you're not paying out 2 years remaining, you're only paying out 1 year remaining. So maybe they just feel like they don't have to make a decision on Petr Mrazek right now.
Right.
Because they also have to, if they get rid of Petr Mrazek, they're starting from zero. I know somebody in the comment section said, Eric Shalgren's getting the shaft a little bit here. He looked good for the games that he desperately needed a goaltender to step up, but it's not something you can roll the dice on.
No, he's still a sub 900 goalie by the end of the year.
So I think you have to. This is not something that you're going to get rid of Petr Mrazek, then you're going to find the new solution. I think it's all right. We have to make sure that we can get that new solution before we can even make a decision on Petr Mrazek going forward.
Yeah, we'll see though. I just thought that was probably the biggest bomb that was dropped within this, was him pumping the tires of Petr Mrazek, and well, maybe we will have to watch that guy in the Leafs net again next season. All right, let's continue on to see what else Kyle Dubas had to say in his media availability ahead of draft day.
Yeah, we're at the final couple minutes, so we're almost done here.
We're good. We've had lots of discussions with them. It's just a matter of obviously we liked what he brought. We traded for him in the year. He brought a physical element for us that we enjoyed having, and was different than what we've had with our club, especially when Sandin went out, because he brings a little bit of that threat as well. It was nice to have him back there, and he plays extremely hard. It's just going to be a matter of what we can afford based on the minutes that he's going to be capable of giving us and the role he's going to be able to give us. We'd love to have him back, but it's also for him and his family a huge opportunity as an unrestricted free agent. So, but if it works, we'd love to have him.
Is Haley going to still pursue her medical here? Is she putting that on pause?
I think that's well. I don't think you can slow her down from anything. She can handle more than any person I've ever known. So it's more adding to the list than subtracting. So that's a question for Haley that she can take at development camp or whenever she speaks to the media next. But I would be shocked if she's taking anything off her plate based on my experience with her. Well, Wes is, and he'll speak, he can answer that question himself because he was a part of the staff before. Wes is extraordinary. Like, his communication with the staff was very similar to John's. I thought he was excellent throughout the year, and I thought he was excellent at hammering home what he wanted from the staff day to day, meeting to meeting. His process was different in terms of wanting the guys to supplement all of their live viewings with more evidence building with video. And not reduce, the live viewings were reduced a little bit due to travel restrictions at times, but not reduce that, but use more video to supplement and check your work and just ensure that the process was as sound as possible on that front. And Wes leans heavily on our analyst department led by Will Sibley and our R&D department that Daryl Metcalf still leads as well, just to put as much evidence as possible into the decision and list building that he can. So, I've worked with Wes a long time now, so I know that he's going to be as thorough and as dialed in as anybody, and it's been evident in just the way he's run the meetings here throughout the year, but mostly the last couple weeks.
So there it is, Kyle Dubas speaking with the media ahead of the NHL Draft, which takes place tonight. The Maple Leafs with pick number 25 as of now. We'll see if they trade it away to either get a player, maybe move back and collect extra picks. They've been prone to do that from time to time, and I wouldn't be shocked if they did that as well. The cachet of being a first round pick is nice, but between picks 35 or 25 and 33, 34 maybe, there's not much difference in talent. It's just a preference. It's whoever you have on top of your board. But if you can trade back and pick up an extra fourth round pick or so, fourth or fifth round pick, and do that, because they only got 3 picks. They got the first, a third, and a 7th rounder. If they can move back in the draft and maybe pick up an extra couple of darts to throw at the board, maybe that helps them out. Really quickly before we jet, I do want to talk about a couple of prospects. Joshua Cloak of The Athletic did write an article yesterday ranking the players that he felt could be good Maple Leaf draft options for the Leafs. So I'll just quickly go through those guys. So some names that you can kind of track as the draft rolls on, as you get into the 20s and it's approaching pick number 25. So the first one he's got is Noah Ostlund, a center from Djurgården, Sweden. 5'3", 163 pounds. They like him. Good playmaker. So if he's there at 25, it seems like that's a player that the Maple Leafs should go after, according to Josh Cloak. Liam Ogren, another player from Djurgården, Sweden, same team, his line mate. He's a left winger, 6 foot, 187 pounds. Was actually ranked 14th on Scott Wheeler's final rankings. A very competitive dude. I also saw a piece saying that his father's a trainer back in Sweden and known as the Gary Roberts of Sweden. So if you got a father that's like Gary Roberts, you're probably a pretty motivated and just a competitive dude. So I don't mind having that. And the scouting report is he's got that blend of scoring, skill, smarts, and sounds like he would be a decent fit for the Leafs at 25 potentially. Rutger McGroarty, big dude, 6'1", 200 pounds. He was also ranked as Corey Promin's 18th overall player, Wheeler's 15th overall player from the U.S. national program. So he's someone who's got some size, plays the wing. So he's a player that potentially they could look to go after. On the blue line, Denton Mateychuk from Moose Jaw, left-hand shot, 5'11", 188 pounds. So a little bit of a smaller, undersized defenseman, but top 13. He's ranked 13th on Wheeler's draft rankings, 14th on Corey Promin's draft rankings. So that would be great if he fell all the way to them at 25. I don't anticipate him falling. I think he's a top 20 pick all day long. Luca Del Belbeluz, another guy, a centerman for the Mississauga Steelheads of the OHL, 6 foot, 175 pounds. He's a potential, local talent that they could look to bring in and help bolster that center position that doesn't have too much depth. Some other players that potentially could be in play, according to Josh Cloak of The Athletic. Philip Major, a right winger from Slovakia, a smaller player but very skilled. Isaac Howard, also another small skill player from the U.S. development program. So there's a couple of guys. Brad Lambert is another one that was ranked. And then he also has a suggestion at pick 79. Pick 79, which is the Maple Leafs' third round pick, their second pick of the draft. And he says, if any of those two top goalies in the draft are still there at 79, that's Tyler Brennan from the WHL and Topias Linonen from the Finnish league. If either of those two are available, take them. And I agree. Take a flyer on a goaltender, which is it's not a great goaltending class from what I've read, but if you can take a stab at one of these guys who are roughly second, third round, level of players, if you take a stab at them and you bring them into that development program, that new goalie department that you have, you're hoping that one of those guys could develop into something. So potentially a goalie is the player that they could look at with that third round pick at 79th overall. So those are just a couple of names for you to maybe look out for over the next couple of days with the Maple Leafs as they get set to draft and bring in some new fresh blood into the organization. Any final words, David?
Draft good players.
Gets a good sound advice. Draft good players. Before we go, prediction time. Who goes number one? Slafkovsky or Shane Wright?
I'm gonna go Shane Wright. I just think Montreal having. I just think they kind of need that guy down the middle. I do think they do need him.
I think they take Slafkovsky, man.
Wouldn't surprise me with the way I'm hearing things going lately. Like it wouldn't surprise me.
Like I've talked to a couple of guys who are down there and on the draft floor. It's almost split, but there's some people that really believe, hey, I'm hearing they're leaning Montreal. If that's the case, or I'm hearing they're leaning Slafkovsky, if that's the case, you can actually get him over at betonline.net for plus money, plus 175 to go first overall. So that might be a decent wager. Or if you believe that Slafkovsky will go first and Shane Wright will go 2, you can get Shane Wright at plus 275 to go second overall. But there's also some late love for like David Jiricek to go second overall. So if Slafkovsky goes number 1, that the Devils might actually go with a defenseman, either Jiricek or Simon Nemec, which would be interesting if Shane Wright were to fall into the third or fourth slot. Corey Proman's final mock draft actually had Shane Wright falling to Seattle at 4. He had Logan Cooley going number 3, Nemec went 2, and Slafkovsky at number 1. Shane Wright falling all the way to 4th overall. If that happened tonight, that would be wild. Wild if that guy ends up going 4th overall and drops out of the top 3. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm looking forward to it. The draft is one of the most highly anticipated events of the season. The Leafs pick at 25. We'll see what they do. We'll see if there's any other big new moves that are made. And if they are, Dave, we'll break it all down on Friday's show. That's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Also follow the show at Locked On Leafs. You could go ahead, smash that like button. Leave a comment down below. Who do you want the Maple Leafs to take at 25th overall? Let us know who you believe is the guy for the Maple Leafs at the 25th pick. All right, that does it for us. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow to break down round 1 of the NHL entry draft and all the moves that will be made on draft day. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked